When you think about the most unexpected match ending, what comes to your mind? Over the years, wrestling fans have seen loads of weird things that happen inside the ring, and that's why in today's video, we're going to dive into some of the strangest and unexpected finishers in WWE's history. And trust me, some of the matches for sure would be the most ridiculous thing you'll see today. Extreme Rules is known for its forgiving guidelines. As the name says, you literally cannot get eliminated. You can use weapons and other things that would be usually banned from normal wrestling matches. This goes as far as allowing wrestlers to fight outside of the ring freely, making everything way more chaotic and violent. During the 2020 edition of this event, Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio had an eye-for-eye match, where the only way to win was by taking your opponent's vision. Towards the end of their fierce fight, Seth grabbed Rey and pressed his face into the corner of the steel steps, and the moment Seth Rollins looked down at what he had just done, he instantly felt unwell. And let's just say his reaction said more than a million words ever could. Of course, loyal fans already know what happened next, but unfortunately, I can't show it here. At WrestleMania 36, The Undertaker and AJ Styles were set for a boneyard match, and nothing could have prepared anyone for what they were about to watch. The entire scene was filmed at a real graveyard, with no crowd and no specially constructed arena, just darkness and two men settling their dispute in the most cinematic way WWE has ever attempted. At the beginning, AJ arrived in a hearse and rose from the coffin, while The Undertaker rode in on a motorcycle to the sound of loud Metallica music. Then they fought for nearly half an hour all over the cemetery, breaking through the fence, on top of the hearse, and across the rooftops of the buildings. Eventually, Undertaker chokeslammed AJ off a roof, dragged him across the grounds, and sent him straight into an open grave, then climbed onto a bulldozer and covered him with dirt. But the moment that made it truly unforgettable came right at the end, when everything went quiet and AJ Styles' hand slowly emerged from the ground, bringing the whole situation to an end unlike anything the wrestling world had ever seen. And if you thought the Boneyard match was insane, wait until you see what happened next. At TLC 2020, Randy Orton and The Fiend stepped into the ring for the first ever Firefly Inferno match. And for most of it, The Fiend looked completely untouchable, until Orton drove him straight into the flames, securing the victory. And even though the match was over, The Fiend refused to stay down and rushed straight back into the ring looking for revenge. But obviously Randy expected that, delivering his iconic finisher out of nowhere. And once he realized what he had just done, he decided to settle the matter once and for all by setting him on fire. Some moments in wrestling are so absurd that even decades later, people still can't quite understand them. Here's the perfect example. At WCW Halloween Havoc 1995, Hulk Hogan and the Giant stepped into the ring for the WCW Championship. The match itself was going as expected when suddenly Jimmy Hart ran in and attacked the referee. And just as Macho Man and Lex Luger came sprinting out seemingly to help Hogan, Luger immediately turned on Savage and started attacking him instead. And then came the part no one was ready for, because suddenly a figure wrapped head to toe in bandages looking like a mummy slowly made its way to the ring. And let's be honest, what happened next didn't fit in with a wrestling show at all. And just when you think you've seen everything wrestling has to offer, WWE finds a way to surprise you. At Extreme Rules 2014, the Federation decided to stage a TLC match, but with one unusual twist. Everything in the match was to be miniature. The tables, the ladders, the chairs, the ring announcer, the referee, even the commentary team had their own scaled-down versions sitting at ringside with names like Micro Cole, JB Elf, and Jimmy the Mini King Waller. No one behind the scenes expected much from it, but what was surprising was that they got nearly 11 minutes of absolute chaos, with hurricaneerins, jumps outside the ring, moves through tables and ladders used as actual weapons. And it all ended with El Torito launching himself off the top rope and put Hornswoggle straight through a tiny table. And to be fair, for a match that no one took seriously before it started, the crowd's reaction spoke for itself. Sometimes the person who costs you a championship isn't even your opponent, and that's exactly what happened at Backlash 2009. At that event, John Cena was defending the World Heavyweight Championship against Edge in a last-man-standing match. Their confrontation was relentless from start to finish, right up to the moment on the stage as John had Edge on his shoulders ready to deliver an attitude adjustment, and Big Show appeared out of nowhere, chokeslamming Cena straight through a spotlight. Unfortunately, the impact was so massive that Cena couldn't get back to his feet, losing the championship in the worst way possible. And if there's one moment in wrestling that genuinely made people question whether what they were watching was real, nothing comes close to what happened at King of the Ring 1998. That night, Mankind and The Undertaker faced off in a Hell in a Cell match, and while everyone knew from the start that it would be a great fight, no one was prepared for what happened next. Early in the match, both men climbed to the top of the cell with Taker immediately sending Mick straight through the announce tables. As sanitarians rushed in, everyone in that building was convinced the match was coming to an end. But instead of staying down, Mick dragged himself back up onto the roof, and once again The Undertaker had him falling straight through the cell, but this time in an even more spectacular way. But the most ridiculous part is that despite the odds, he still survived finishing the match. At Money in the Bank 2020, WWE decided to do something that had never been done before, and to be honest, will probably never be done again. Because instead of a normal ladder match, the entire thing took place inside WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. Both the men's and women's matches took place at the same time, with everyone starting on the ground floor and fighting their way up to the roof where the briefcases were hanging. But the finish was the most ridiculous part of all, as AJ Styles climbed the ladder, unhooked the briefcase, and raised it in the air, which technically meant he won. However, he failed to catch it, so the suitcase landed right in the hands of Otis, who was standing below with the referee, and the ref had no choice but to declare him the winner. January 29, 2012 is a date that Kofi Kingston's fans will remember forever, because what happened that night made the entire fan base go wild. At the Royal Rumble, when Miz was fighting with Kofi, at one particular moment, Kofi found himself with no room to escape. So Miz tried to throw him over the rope, but Kingston did something no one expected. He landed smoothly on both of his hands, walking backwards towards the ring. The crowd absolutely lost it, delivering a kind of reaction you genuinely had to be there to feel. Even Michael Cole let out a loud, "Are you kidding me?" This led to this move being one of the memorable of the night. And what's even better is that he turned this into a little tradition which he was cultivating up until 2018, when he broke his streak of surprising fans by not touching the floor in various creative ways. For instance, in 2013, he was thrown onto the announcer's table, but he managed to go back into the ring by using a chair borrowed from one of the commentators. In the final moments of Royal Rumble 2005, Batista grabbed Cena for his finishing move, but instead of winning cleanly, the momentum sent both men on the floor at the exact same time. The crowd didn't know how to react, because in one corner, Raw refs raised Batista's hand, while SmackDown ones raised Cena's. And that's when Vince McMahon furiously stormed straight to the ring and with pure rage in his eyes demanded that the match should be restarted. And although Cena lost the match, he later admitted it was entirely his fault and that it should never have happened. As all fans remember at TLC 2010, The Miz was defending the WWE Championship against Randy Orton in a tables match. The fight was going back and forth for some time between opponents, with Miz's assistant Riley doing everything to protect his boss. In the middle of the rivalry, the referee got knocked out. Orton, with nobody watching, grabbed Riley and powerbombed him straight through a table. And that's when Miz came up with a brilliant idea to hit Randy with the skull-crushing finale, wake the referee up, and point directly at Randy with a sick smile on his face. And when the referee opened his eyes and saw Orton lying on the table, he had no choice but to award the victory to Miz. Up until 2014, The Undertaker held the title of being undefeated on WrestleMania, as he won 21 matches up until that point. But that year was devastating for him, because as everyone remembers, Brock Lesnar unexpectedly broke his streak. The Undertaker, consumed by a desire for revenge, was waiting for the right moment to strike, and a year later, in 2015, they met in the ring again. The match was everything you'd expect when these two stepped into the ring together, relentless and completely unpredictable. But then, by the end of the match, as Lesnar locked him in the Kimura lock and cranked it as hard as he could, The Undertaker gave up, unable to withstand the pain. Or was he? When Lesnar started celebrating with Paul Heyman that Taker tapped out, the referee Charles Robinson instantly declared that he hadn't seen a thing, because The Undertaker's tapping hand was completely out of his line of sight. And while everyone was still arguing, Undertaker hit Brock with a vicious low blow. And before Lesnar could even process it, Hell's Gate was already locked in. With no way out, Brock was fading fast. But even in his final moments, he refused to give Undertaker the satisfaction of tapping out, and instead, he raised his finger directly in Taker's face as he slipped into unconsciousness. Of course, The Undertaker wasn't the only one who ever found himself in a situation like this, but in my opinion, no one handled it as well as he did. And just when you thought WWE couldn't surprise you anymore, they went and did something like this. At the 2014 TLC event, Dean Ambrose and Bray Wyatt engaged in a fierce tables, ladders, and chairs match, with both wrestlers ready to use anything they can put their hands on to eliminate their opponent. Late in the match, Dean pulled out a monitor from under the ring and charged straight at Wyatt. But what he didn't know was that the monitor was still plugged in, and the moment he swung it, the cord got yanked out of the screen, exploding directly in his face. And if you thought Bray wouldn't take advantage of such a great opportunity, you'd be wrong. Because as soon as it happened, he seized the moment to win the match. At WrestleMania 20, Eddie Guerrero was defending the WWE Championship against Kurt Angle. For most of the match, Kurt was absolutely destroying him, repeatedly locking in his ankle lock and refusing to let go. Eddie, clearly in pain, was doing everything he could to not give up. And after a while, he finally managed to break free and send Kurt out of the ring. While the exhausted opponent was trying to catch his breath, Eddie came up with a plan. He slowly loosened up the laces in his boots. When Kurt came back to the ring and delivered his lock again, Eddie kicked the boot off his own foot, leaving Kurt completely in shock. In that split second, Eddie rolled him up, pinned him, and just like that, he retained the championship. On SmackDown 2003, Brock Lesnar was defending the WWE Championship against Big Show in the main event. For most of the match, it looked like a pretty standard fight between two giants. But then came the moment nobody was ready for. Late in the match, Lesnar somehow managed to drag the 500-pound Big Show all the way up to the top turnbuckle and hit a superplex from the top rope. The moment almost 800 pounds of combined weight crashed to the mat, all 4 ring posts popped out of their sockets simultaneously, causing the entire ring to collapse underneath them. The moment it happened, the entire arena went wild, so much so that one of the commentators completely lost his composure and shouted. Immediately afterward, the cameras focused on the medical team, which rushed into the ring to check if both fighters were okay. Obviously, no official score was ever recorded as there was nothing left to continue the match. At the Great American Bash in July 2007, 5 of SmackDown's best cruiserweights stepped into the ring for an open championship match. For several minutes, all 5 of them were absolutely beating the hell out of each other, until suddenly when Jamie Noble was lying completely exhausted on the mat, Hornswoggle crawled out of nowhere, climbed on the top rope, delivered his tadpole splash, and secured a victory. Even the commentators had no idea what they were even looking at. And right after that, Hornswoggle grabbed his Cruiserweight Championship, climbed on top of the announcer's table, and started celebrating. Then all 5 Cruiserweight competitors turned around, and as soon as they realized what had just happened, they all charged straight at him. But Hornswoggle had already seen it coming and dove straight under the ring, crawled out the other side, and dashed up the ramp with the championship belt tucked under his arm. Now, when it comes to the most ridiculous match finishes in WWE history, this next one is genuinely hard to beat. On an episode of SmackDown in 2016, AJ Styles decided to choose his own opponent for the night, and that opponent was none other than James Ellsworth. If you don't know who Ellsworth is, that's exactly the point. This guy was the definition of an underdog, which is why AJ would have no trouble at all facing him in the ring. However, he didn't expect Daniel Bryan to throw in a little twist by appointing Dean Ambrose as a special guest referee, and if AJ were to touch Dean at any point during the match, he would face a fine or suspension, which left AJ completely powerless, and Ambrose knew exactly how to use that. For the entire match, Ambrose did everything in his power to drive AJ absolutely crazy without technically breaking any rules. He picked up phone calls while Ellsworth was literally tapping out. He took his time posing for photos with fans, and his pin counts were so slow that AJ looked ready to snap before Ambrose even got to 2. At one point, AJ hit the Styles Clash and had Ellsworth completely finished, but Dean just looked the other way as if nothing happened. Instead, he hit AJ with Dirty Deeds, laid Ellsworth on top of him, and counted the fastest 3 you've ever seen. And when it comes to people who had no business changing the outcome of a match, this next one takes it to a whole different level. At SummerSlam 2015, Seth Rollins and John Cena had a winner-takes-all match with both the WWE Championship and the United States Championship on the line at the same time. I don't know if you'll agree with me on this one, but the match itself was genuinely one of the best of that entire year. Without going into too much detail, it was a fierce battle that lasted nearly 20 minutes full of finishing blows, counterattacks, and unexpected takedowns. Until the referee went down and Jon Stewart came with a steel chair out of nowhere. For a moment, he just stood there in the middle of the ring looking at both men until he finally made his choice to go after Cena. As soon as Cena hit the mat, Seth wasted no time immediately hitting him with a pedigree and pinning him with ease. And within seconds, Seth Rollins walked out of SummerSlam holding both the United States and WWE Championship at the same time. And here's the wild part. John later explained he interfered for one simple reason. He couldn't stand the idea of Cena tying Ric Flair's world title record, which honestly has to be one of the strangest reasons ever to get involved in a wrestling match. And even though everything we've talked about so far was truly crazy, nothing could have prepared anyone for what happened at Survivor Series in the 2000s. At that time, Triple H had been behind a plan to put Austin out of action for almost a year. So when these two finally met in a no disqualification match, Austin wasn't coming to wrestle. He was coming for revenge. From the very beginning, Austin unleashed an absolute hell on Triple H by putting him through the announce table and hitting him with a devastating stunner multiple times. But unable to beat Stone Cold fair and square, Triple H slipped out through the backstage, and the moment Austin came after him, his allies jumped out of nowhere and blocked his path, giving him enough time to escape. And as Triple H sat there in his car looking around confused, all of a sudden the entire vehicle started rising from the ground. And when he looked out the window and saw Austin behind the wheel of a forklift, he immediately started screaming and begging him to stop. But even that wasn't enough to stop Stone from sending him down. Now, the next situation I want to explain needs a little context, because it wasn't really a match in any traditional sense. Among the many matches at WrestleMania 36, John Cena and Bray Wyatt were scheduled to a Firefly Funhouse match for which no rules had been announced. At first, everything seemed completely normal, but the moment John tried to greet everyone at WrestleMania, all of a sudden Bray appeared and told him he was about to face the toughest opponent of his career, and obviously, he was referring to John himself. And from that moment on, Bray dragged him through a twisted version of his own career, using his past alter egos against him. But here's the kicker. Once he was done with his mind games, as usual, he turned himself into a monster, and using his overwhelming presence, left Cena completely helpless on the mat. And that's when once again the real Bray appeared, knelt down next to Cena, and instead of waiting for referee, he counted the 3 himself. And before anyone could even react, he vanished as Fiend, securing the victory. And if you thought that was an unusual match, take a look at this one. At ECW House Party 1998, Al Snow made his entrance with the entire crowd pulling out mannequin heads and began waving them in sync as he made his way toward the ring. And what happened next was unlike anything you've ever seen in a wrestling ring, because he used the same dummy head the crowd had been chanting for as a weapon. It seemed to be working, because his opponents were falling to the mat one after another from his strikes. But the best moment came when he dropped from the top rope and pinned his opponent without lifting a single leg, which some fans still can't quite understand to this day. Now let's talk about one of the funniest fails in WWE history. And even though this wasn't even a match finish, it's absolutely worth mentioning. At the Greatest Royal Rumble 2018, the Federation decided to host a 50-man Royal Rumble, which was the biggest one in their history at that point. The entire event was going smoothly until Titus's music hit, but the moment he came out from behind the curtain running full speed down towards the ring, everything turned to chaos, because suddenly he tripped and slid under the ring. The whole arena burst into laughter. The commentators absolutely lost it, to the point Michael Cole couldn't even get his words out. WWE replayed it over and over again from multiple angles. And the reason why they kept showing it? Well, rumor has it that Vince McMahon himself was sitting backstage almost in tears from laughing, and that it was his direct order to the production team to keep playing it back. However, not everyone was laughing. Santino Marella was one of the few who immediately pointed out that Titus was inches away from hitting the steel bar underneath the ring, and that if he'd slid at a slightly different angle, this funny moment could have very quickly turned into something nobody would have been laughing about. Thankfully, everything was fine, and shortly after the incident, he crawled back and got into the ring. Unfortunately, his fight didn't last long, as he got eliminated minutes later. At SummerSlam 2016, Brock Lesnar stepped into the ring to face Randy Orton in what was supposed to be a normal match. But from the middle of it, something felt different, because as Lesnar started losing control, he decided to completely abandon the script by taking his gloves off and started hitting Randy with real elbows to the point he couldn't continue the match. And even though Brock secured a victory, that still wasn't enough to satisfy him, because instead of walking away, he launched himself back at Randy like the match never even ended. And that's when Shane McMahon rushed to the ring to tell Brock to back off. But to nobody's surprise, not only did he ignore him, but on top of that, he went even further by delivering him a devastating F5. At Over the Limit 2010, Batista confidently stepped into the ring convinced he was going to make John Cena quit. Right from the first second, Batista was throwing him around as if he weighed nothing, slamming him into the commentary table and hitting him so hard in the head that the referee asked, "Cena, do you want to quit?" But even though he was covered in blood, Cena's answer stayed the same. But when Batista thought he finally could finish him, everything changed. To everyone's surprise, Cena pulled him out of that car and hit a devastating attitude adjustment right onto the hood. But even that wasn't enough to make him quit. And the moment he realized there was no way out, he immediately screamed. "I quit!" And here's the crazy part. Even though he quit, it didn't stop John from sending him right through the stage. This moment is actually funny, because the entrances were actually longer than the match itself. As we all remember in 2016, The Rock made his entrance through massive flamethrowers and announced the biggest attendance record in WrestleMania history. However, right in the middle of his speech, the lights suddenly went off, and seconds later, the Wyatt family stood face to face with him, making it clear that this wasn't his show. To everyone's surprise, instead of losing his temper, The Rock remained calm, called for a referee, and issued an immediate challenge to one of the Wyatt family members. The choice fell on Eric Rowan, and as soon as the bell rang, The Rock dropped him with one move and finished the match in 6 seconds, setting a new record for the shortest match in WrestleMania history. But that wasn't the end of it, because what just happened enraged the Wyatt family to the point where they wanted to fight him 3-on-1. And just when everyone thought it was all over, John Cena's music hit. And even though these two had massive beef with each other in the past, he came out to support him, which was genuinely cool to watch. In 2020, truly the weirdest event took place, because Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt had a swamp fight. Yes, you heard that right. They were literally fighting inside a pond. You couldn't even call it a match because it literally was a horror movie. In the opening scene, Strowman arrived by car and walked toward a swamp where Bray, as expected, was sitting in his old rocking chair. Suddenly, however, the lights went out and he disappeared. Furious, Strowman smashed his chair into pieces. While looking for him, he got attacked in the dark by several hooded figures. After managing to fight them off, Strowman was knocked unconscious after being struck in the head with a shovel. And seconds later, he woke up in Wyatt's house surrounded by creepy dolls. Soon after Bray appeared from nowhere with a twisted smile on his face, he walked closer, calmly telling Braun how proud he was of him and that his place was right by his side. And just when it seemed the situation couldn't get any more terrifying, Bray brought out a snake that struck and bit Strowman. When Braun finally came to, he was outside by a fire, and before he could even process what just happened, men dressed in black rushed straight at him from every direction. But one by one, Braun fought them all off like they were nothing. And just when he thought it was finally over, vision of Alexa Bliss appeared, telling him they were always meant to be together. But obviously, it was all a trap. And the second Braun let his guard down, Bray launched himself from the darkness and attacked him from behind. But Braun recovered fast and sent him crashing straight into a boat that slowly disappeared into the darkness. What he didn't expect was for that boat to come back empty. And that's when once again he got attacked from behind and pulled underwater. Both Bray and Braun disappeared beneath the surface, until the Fiend slowly rose from the darkness, stared straight into the camera, and without saying a word, ended the show. I think we can all agree it was by far one of the wildest WWE matches to this day. Speaking of the Royal Rumble again, the 2011 edition gave us one of the best planned eliminations in the history of this tournament. At that event, Miz came out to ringside as WWE Champion, not as a participant, but sitting at the commentary table to watch. That same evening, he had already successfully defended his title earlier that night against Randy Orton, and the last thing he wanted now was Cena winning the Rumble and getting a shot at his championship at WrestleMania. For most of that match, he just sat there at the commentary table, not looking particularly worried about anything, until Cena started getting dangerously close to winning the whole thing, and that's when Miz decided to react. With Alex Riley distracting Cena from one side, Miz quietly sneaked right behind him and yanked him straight over the top rope, and although neither wrestler managed to eliminate him, the referees ordered John to leave the ringside. If you thought everything I've covered so far was ridiculous, wait until you see what happened next. On WCW Thunder 1998, the Giant, nowadays better known as Big Show, stepped into the ring to face Scott Hall in what looked like a pretty normal main event. For the first few minutes, Hall had absolutely no answer to the Giant's attacks, and everyone in the stands knew it as well. That was until Kevin Nash showed up at ringside and interfered, leaving the referee with no choice but to call for the bell and hand Hall the win by disqualification. The Giant was absolutely livid, and since he couldn't get his hands on Nash, he did something nobody in that building could have predicted. To everyone's surprise, he walked straight to the corner and with his bare hands started tearing the entire ring apart. And while all of that was happening, Scott Hall was still standing right there in the ring, selling every single impact like he was the one getting hit. Some moments in wrestling you simply never forget, and this is one of them. At WrestleMania 19, Brock Lesnar stepped into the ring to face Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. For the majority of the match, it was exactly what you'd expect from two legitimate wrestling champions, until Brock did something nobody was ready for. Late in the fight, Brock thought it'd be a brilliant idea to climb to the top rope and attempt one of the most difficult high-flying moves in all of professional wrestling. As you might have already guessed, Brock landed directly on his neck, and as he lay there motionless for those few seconds, even his biggest haters started worrying about him. And when everyone thought it was all over, Brock recovered and won the match. At a recent episode of Raw in 2026, Logan together with iShow Speed stepped into the ringside to watch Austin Theory take on LA Knight. From the very beginning, Knight was dominating, but at one point, exactly when Austin was losing control, Logan shoved Speed straight into him. But as Speed desperately tried to explain that it wasn't his fault, everything turned to chaos. To everyone's surprise, Knight didn't want to hear his explanations, and without any hesitation charged straight at him. Speed immediately started backing up toward the entrance ramp until suddenly Jey Uso's music hit, and without wasting a single second, he jumped over him and rushed straight back to the ring. But just as he thought he escaped, Knight caught him out of nowhere and dragged him back to the center of the ring. And when every fan thought there was no way out, Logan caused a perfect distraction, allowing Theory to roll him up from behind to end the match. And the best part? Speed genuinely had no idea what he'd done until it was over. In one of the episodes of Monday Night Raw 1999, The Undertaker and Kane faced off in their second ever Inferno match. But this time, the outcome was even more outrageous. Partway through the match, Paul Bearer walked over to Vince McMahon at ringside and handed him a black box, with nobody in that building, including McMahon himself, having any idea what was inside it. When Vince finally opened it, he found a teddy bear. But not just some random toy, because later it turned out to be a childhood thing that had once belonged to his daughter Stephanie, which explains exactly why, from the moment he laid eyes on it, you could have clearly noticed the shift in his face. And that distraction was all The Undertaker needed. With McMahon completely consumed by what he was holding, Undertaker turned his full attention back to Kane, grabbed his leg, and dragged it directly into the flames. While everyone was still processing what just happened, The Undertaker was already walking toward McMahon. And without hesitating, he reached down, took the bear right out of his hands, and set it on fire right in front of him. Sometimes the person you trust the most is the one you shouldn't have trusted at all. Here's the perfect example. At TLC 2012, John Cena had a ladder match against Dolph Ziggler for the Money in the Bank briefcase. Now, going into this match, as you all remember, Cena had been in a relationship with AJ Lee for months, so when Vicky Guerrero ran into the ring to interfere and AJ ran in right behind her to stop her, no one expected anything else to go wrong in the match, especially when AJ came out wearing Cena's own merch and even hit Vicky with his signature move. But the moment Cena reached the top of that ladder, AJ started skipping around the ring, and just as he was inches away from winning, suddenly she pushed the ladder, sending Cena down, and before anyone could even react, Ziggler climbed up to grab the briefcase. Since we're talking about so many unexpected things, we can't leave without mentioning Randy Orton. Evan Bourne was known as one of the most talented high flyers on the roster, and on one episode of Raw in 2010, he found himself in the ring with Randy Orton, whom I'm sure needs no introduction. After dropping Orton to the mat with a high kick, Bourne wasted no time and sprinted straight to the corner, climbed to the top rope, and just as Evan was about to finish what he started, Randy suddenly jumped up and caught him mid-air, hitting him with an RKO. At SummerSlam 2016, Finn Balor stepped into the ring to fight Seth Rollins for the brand new Universal Championship. Right from the opening bell, both men were giving everything they had. But early into the match, everything changed as Seth grabbed Finn and launched him with a running powerbomb straight into the barricade. And the moment his body crashed into that barrier, his shoulder accidentally got dislocated. But what happened next shocked even the referees themselves. Because instead of stopping the match, Finn looked down at his arm, took a deep breath, and somehow he found the strength to step back into that ring, climb to the top rope, hit his finishing move, and as the referee's hand hit the mat for the third time, Finn Balor became the first ever Universal Champion in history. Although it wasn't a clean match, it's also worth mentioning. During the 2010 Royal Rumble, Beth Phoenix unexpectedly entered the ring during a men's match, and what happened next couldn't have been staged any better. Now, for those who don't know, Beth Phoenix at the time was one of the most physically dominant women on a roster, but none of that mattered the moment the great Khali stepped forward, picked her up without sweating, and told her to quit. Khali didn't even take her seriously, and that was exactly what she was waiting for, because the moment he let his guard down, Beth decided to kiss him. And the second his brain turned off completely, she eliminated him straight over the top rope. Nobody in wrestling history has ever eliminated themselves from the Royal Rumble the way Andre the Giant did in 1989. At that point in his career, he was already a living legend, defeating everyone who dared to stand in his way, except one person, Jake Roberts. The best part of all that was that Jake didn't even have to throw a single punch. All he had to do was walk to the ring with a bag, unzip it, and let his snake out onto the mat. Which finish surprised you the most? Let me know down below, and I'll see you in the next video.